The sun rises on Kruger National Park, almost 2 million hectares or 19,500 square kilometres of natural South African habitat. It's home to 147 different species of mammals, around 500 species of birds, 118 species of reptiles, 35 species of amphibians, almost 30 fish species, and a staggering 300 different tree species and countless insects. For them, the Kruger Park is home. For us, it is a place of wonder and beauty. There are 9 different biomes in the Kruger, and vast landscapes differ enormously throughout the park. Temperatures can vary throughout the seasons from 14 degrees C to almost 42 degrees C, and generally these are on the increase. The park straddles 2 provinces in the north-eastern sector of South Africa, Mpumalanga in the south and Limpopo in the north, and it has borders with Mozambique to the east and Zimbabwe to the north. For the people who work there, it is the best workplace in the world. Stunning vistas, savannas, riverine forest, mapani scrub, mixed thornfelt and bushveld, with a multitude of animals and birds combined to make it one of the most interesting and biologically diverse places in the world. Each habitat is exploited by many species who can all extract a living from it in both the wet and dry seasons, providing food, shelter, water, nesting and denning materials, and of course, mates. The Kruger Park is of course home to the famous Big Five of Africa, a name given by the hunters of old who considered elephant, lion, leopard, buffalo and rhino the 5 most dangerous animals to hunt. It is also home to a myriad of other plant and animal species, and all these play their part in the daily life of the Kruger ecosystem. Plains game like zebra, wildebeest, buffalo, impala, kudu and giraffe both live in and migrate through the park along its eastern border with Mozambique. Big cats like lion, leopard and cheetah, and smaller cat species like the African wildcat, serval and caracal are all predators in their own right, taking species as large as buffalo and as small as shrews, dependent on their species and food preferences. Generally, the smaller the cat, the smaller the prey, although leopard will at times catch small birds and lizards if pickings are slim. Other large predators such as hyena are also excellent hunters in their own right, as well as being scavengers and opportunists. Indeed, many times when hyenas are found trying to steal a kill from lions, the real truth is that they are simply trying to retrieve what has been stolen from them after a hard night's hunting by some lazy lions. Lions have also been known to hunt elephant, although they take the very young or injured animals, and hunting giraffe, even full-grown ones, has never been a problem, simply more of a challenge. One of the most efficient predators are African wild hunting dogs, rarely missing their prey and generally dispatching it much faster than the strangling and suffocating neck or muzzle hold of a lion, which can take up to half an hour to kill. Arboreal hunters such as genets and bush babies take prey such as birds and insects, and ground-dwelling species such as the honey badgers and mongooses prey on insects, beetles, scorpions, snakes, frogs and toads. Baboons and vervet monkeys are also adept both on the ground and in the trees, and have omnivorous diets, taking in all manner of fruit, leaves, grasses, small birds, insects, grubs, birds' eggs, roots and tubers, and in the case of the baboon, occasionally meat. There are 2 main seasons that dominate the climate of the Kruger Park: the hot dry season and the humid wet season. The short rains starting usually around November to December, and the long rains between January and March. Daylight length varies between around 13.5 and 12 hours, dependent on the season. Diurnal and nocturnal animals maximise their activities during the almost equal hours of daylight and darkness. Most of the species of mammals in the Kruger produce their young at the beginning of the rainy season, but some, like the impala antelope, can actually delay or speed up their deliveries if the rains are early or late. The glut of young animals born en masse always ensure that despite the losses made to predators, there are always sufficient animals to carry on, and in that way there is always a healthy balance of predator to prey species throughout the park. Impalas form different groups at different times of the year. Female groups with young or waiting to lamb, bachelor groups of older and younger males challenging each other for dominance and the right to mate, and harem groups of receptive females, jealously guarded and defended by the strongest males, who will pass on their genes to the next generation. Elephants, the architects of the parks, are responsible for rapid and extensive changes in habitat. When numbers are in excess of healthy stocking levels, they can be extremely destructive, uprooting and debarking thousands of trees which destroy habitats for many other species. At the same time, a fallen tree can start to provide new habitats whilst it lies on the ground, giving shade and protection to seeds and providing homes to small birds, animals and insects, and so life goes on in an ever-revolving circle. A single elephant's footprint can leave a slight depression on the ground. Rain falls and makes a small puddle. A warthog arrives, attracted by the fresh grass emerging around the edge, and decides after eating it that it's getting hot and it's now time for his cooling mud bath. So he rolls in the puddle and eventually walks off, coated in thick mud to protect him from the sun and biting insects. The day after, the same thing happens again, and in a few days the amount of mud lost to the warthog's backs leaves a bigger depression, which again fills up with the next arrival of rain, and the same thing happens again, but with larger species such as buffalo or zebra. Within a couple of months, the pan is now holding water for days and attracting water birds who are attracted by insects and flies that are attracted by the droppings of the mud-wallowing animals. Birds fly in from other larger ponds or rivers, sometimes carrying small pieces of water plants containing fish eggs on their legs. And it is not long before a new little ecosystem has formed and the elephant's footprint has become a large semi-permanent or permanent water source, attracting all manner of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish and insects. Meanwhile, the many and varied seeds that have been protected from the fierce African sun and kept damp under the fallen trees begin to germinate. They grow, slowly at first, protected by the fallen trees, but accelerate once their heads are above the twisted branches and into the sun, and thus new life is generated, and once again the bushveld is full of young saplings that will eventually replace all those damaged by the elephants. Elephants are no fools and rarely damage mature fruit trees, preferring instead to shake the trees and pick up the fallen fruit and seed pods, ensuring that there will be another harvest the following year in a place that they will always remember. As they leave that place to browse elsewhere, they leave their droppings, many of which now contain tree seeds, warm and damp in their own little supply of fresh fertilizer, which both nourishes and feeds the young seedlings. Some species of trees actually need to pass through an animal's gut before they will germinate, ultimately tying some species together, one dependent on the other, and vice versa. Baboons, vervet monkeys and many species of fruit-eating birds and bats also distribute seeds in the same way, thus ensuring the continued diversification and renewal of the Kruger+park habitat. Baboons, mongooses and dung beetles forage through the droppings and once again digest any seeds that they find, and give the hardest seeds another soak in their digestive juices, which normally ensures germination of even the most stubborn seeds. Droppings rolled away and buried by dung beetles that lay their eggs in them fertilise the ground, providing food for both the beetle grubs and the meerkats and mongooses that dig them up. Huge areas of thick thornveldt scattered with rock kopjes and many miles of rivers provide diverse habitats for many different species. Each habitat has its own specialist. Some antelope, like the secretive nyala, prefer the thick bush and are rarely seen in the open spaces. Others, such as impala, prefer a more broken and open habitat, although when the dry season offers little, they can both be found out of their normal comfort zones. Some species of antelope utilise very specific habitats. Klipspringers, the so-called ballerinas of the rocks, inhabit the rock kopjes that are found scattered throughout the park and are rarely found far away from them. These tiny antelope mark their territories by pasting twigs and grasses with a special scent from their pre-orbital glands, thus claiming ownership over their rocky domains. Many species of grazers and browsers can be seen in an area at the same time, all feeding on the same trees, bushes and grasses, but each taking different elements from the same plants. Wildebeest prefer short, stubby, new growth of grasses and follow the rains for the same reason. Zebra feed on the same grasses but prefer the longer, coarser leaves and stems. Many antelope also browse on different parts of the same bushes. The tiny steenbok prefers the small emerging leaves. Impalas will take anything, and some will only take older and larger leaves. When times are hard, even the dry leaves and seed pods are even taken, as animals try to survive until the start of the short rains and life once again returns to the dry and barren veldt. Some animals get their mineral intakes from the varied and different clays found around waterholes and below the sand in dry river beds. Giraffe are commonly seen chewing other animal bones to extract the calcium, no doubt to furnish the mineral needs of their massive skeletons. Baboons will take freshwater mussels when the water is low enough not to conceal crocodiles, and they will at times wade through waist-height water to pick water lily tubers and flowers when they are available. Many animals take advantage of situations that may surprise us. Small birds sometimes nest amongst the nest of eagles, knowing that they are safe from other predators. Some species of weaver birds regularly build nests above ponds or rivers where crocodiles live, which again gives them protection from ground and water predators like rock and water monitors. Birds, baboons and monkeys give out differing alarm calls when they are aware of danger in the area, and, in this way, assist their neighbours in keeping one step ahead of any predators. Many animals will take note of other animals in their area whilst they are feeding or resting to give them early warnings of predators. Animals like impala will follow troops of baboons that are feeding in trees, eating anything they drop, but also benefiting from all those extra eyes that can see the predators approaching from afar and warn the herd with their booming alarm barks. Some relationships, like oxpeckers have with their animal hosts, are more symbiotic. And whilst the birds benefit from the amount of blood-filled ticks that they clean from their host's skin, they do give alarm calls and warn their host of possible predators long before the host is usually aware of it. There is, however, good evidence that oxpeckers also keep fresh wounds open, acting like tiny vampires, feeding on the fresh blood supplies and benefiting only themselves. When the dry season is at its worst, animals can still rely, for the moment, on the wind-pumped water holes scattered throughout the park. These were installed years ago, well before major studies of complete ecosystems were ever thought of. The plus side was that visitors could always rely on finding game around these artificial water supplies at times of drought. Later on, after much study and research into how natural systems worked, and in particular on how elephants can totally destroy their own environments when not allowed to migrate and disperse naturally, it was found that artificial water supplies unbalanced the natural balance of the systems and led to widespread habitat destruction. These artificial wind-pump water sources are now slowly being decommissioned to give the Kruger a more natural way of maintaining natural stocking levels. The park is fenced for most of its range, but a recent change has been the removal of the trans-frontier fence between the South African and Mozambique areas. This allows for a more natural migration of the animals across these former boundaries, and only time will tell if this move is a successful one. Kruger is surrounded by many towns and game reserves, and South African national parks do much to educate and accommodate their neighbours and try to educate the local people about the value of setting aside vast tracts of land for reserves. Those who benefit from jobs in tourism and craft industries, hotels, culture centres and the like, do not normally have a problem with the park. But farmers with starving animals and who lose their hard-grown crops to marauding elephant, however, are less inclined to speak favourably of it. Population growth needs land to house people, and there will always be conflict. Wildlife conservation needs to go hand in hand with local people if it is to be effective and long-lasting. It would be unfair to ask the father of a starving child to forgive an elephant who has just trampled his entire crop and ruined his annual income. Dealing with excess elephants is an emotive and controversial subject. Two methods are usually employed, but both are incredibly costly. The more humane method is to implant contraception in the females. The second method, culling, involves the shooting of complete families of elephants, from newborn calves right the way up to the matriarchs. None of these methods are popular with either animal lovers or conservationists, but the often quoted alternative of relocation of complete herds is even more costly than the first two, and also requires a willing and favourable landowner with sufficient land to support these massive animals, and just one elephant needs approximately 50 hectares merely to survive. Shooting is not allowed in the park, but outside of the park, trophy hunting raises around $300 million annually. This money filters back into the local economy, improving the lives of the locals through jobs for guides, trackers, skinners, hunting outfitters, taxidermists, lodge staff, hotels and local shops, car hire companies and airline companies. Many of the hunting concessions also support local schools and hospitals by providing both meat to feed and money to build both schools and local health clinics. If wildlife is to be conserved in South Africa, it has to have a local and monetary value. White rhino almost became extinct in my lifetime, but they were brought back from the brink of extinction by farmers who turned to breeding them instead of raising beef cattle that did not fare well in the bush. The huge amounts of land needed to conserve game need to be maintained, fenced and protected from poachers. Some of these places are so large that you can drive for half a day and still be on the same reserve. And so, to pay for all these material and labour costs, animals unfortunately have to pay their way. The park has regular sales of live game animals that are surplus to requirements. These animals have to pay their way and bring much needed income into the park that is used for both conservation studies and the day-to-day running of the park, which employs thousands of people from local communities. Maintaining both tar and dirt roads in the park is a full-time job, especially in the rainy season. Many of the bridges are flooded and damaged by the swollen rivers in the wet season and need constant maintenance. Huge amounts of food and goods have to be transported into the parks each day to serve the many rest camps and restaurants, fuel depots and maintenance workshops that serve the thousands of tourists that visit the Kruger each and every year. Rubbish also needs to be disposed of, and there is lots of it, including food waste. South Africa National Parks has to tread a fine line when disposing of rubbish containing food. On the one hand, it has notices everywhere saying do not feed the animals, and on the other hand, it has a mountain of both rubbish and food waste to dispose of each and every day. If you're near a rest camp and you spot vultures and marabou storks circling overhead, it does not always necessarily mean that there is a lion kill. There are 12 main rest camps and a number of bush camps and private concessions throughout the Kruger National Park. All these have to be maintained on a daily basis with the minimal impact on the flora and fauna of the park. Camping is also available at some of the rest camps and can be a thrilling way to enjoy the wonders of the Kruger National Park. Lying in your tent at night, listening to the distant sounds of lions and sometimes very close calls of hyenas as they patrol the perimeter fences can be a once-in-a-lifetime exhilarating experience that is never to be forgotten. Sometimes interference cannot be avoided. When lions decide to use your car to hide behind whilst they ambush buffalo on the road, it is difficult, if not impossible, to think you are not interfering, but mostly the animals take it all in their stride. Thousands of sightings take place every day with minimal impact, although there have, over the years, been a number of unfortunate incidents that ended badly for both animals and people. Mostly, these are due to people's stupidity or simply not following the rules. If you are going to be stuck in a traffic jam whilst on holiday, there is no more an exciting one than being in the middle of a titanic life and death struggle between lions and buffaloes. I would willingly swap that for drive to work traffic any day of the week. The best times to visit the park for game viewing is in the dry season, when the majority of leaves have fallen from the trees and bushes. This enables you to see deep into the brush from the tar and dirt roads that traverse the park, making it a lot easier to spot game that you would easily miss in the wet season, when the bush is lush and thick. The wet season also brings with it many migrant species of birds that come for the insects, and also coincides with the nesting of many of these species. It is also the time when many young antelope, zebra and giraffe are born, so it's the best time to visit the park if you're looking for those cute photos. In the 90 years that the Kruger National Park has been open, it has, where wildlife viewing is the main attraction, become the most visited national park in Africa. Visitor numbers have increased from less than 30 in 1927 to 1.8 million in the 2016-2017 season. At the current 6% rate of increase, visitors will double to almost 3.65 million by 2029. As long-term population growth will ultimately put pressure on land set aside for conservation, the park's long-term future is definitely not as secure as some of us would prefer it to be. If you are thinking of visiting, there is no time like the present. Kruger is the most visited national park in Africa, and hopefully, long may it remain so.